Hello and welcome. My name is Elizabeth Chur, and I'm the author of The Joy of Talking Politics with Strangers: How to Save Democracy One Conversation at a Time. Since 2017, I've talked with more than 1,000 voters in person and over the phone, and I've trained more than 2,500 volunteers nationally about how to make the most of every conversation with a voter. I've also cured almost 40 ballots in close elections, and I want to share some of my top tips for how to maximize your chances of success. As you probably know, if a voter forgets to sign their vote by mail ballot envelope, or their signature doesn't exactly match the one on file, their ballot won't be counted unless they sign a cure form. That's an affidavit provided by the registrar of voters with a signature verification statement. If you've ever done door-to-door canvassing, ballot curing is similar, but there are some additional strategies that can help you. I'll preface this by saying that, of course, you should follow the directions given to you by the campaign staff. The following tips are just extra tools in your back pocket when you're out in the field. Because some campaigns may only want us to spend energy curing ballots of people who voted for our candidate, it may take a little finesse trying to determine who they supported. I like to say something like, "Hi, my name is Elizabeth Chur, and I'm a volunteer with the Democratic Party and congressional candidate Rudy Salas. I just had a quick follow-up to the election. I'm wondering if Rudy Salas might have earned your vote in the recent election." Some people are happy to tell me how they voted. If they make it clear they voted for the other candidate, I politely say, "Oh, thanks so much for letting me know. Have a great day." And then I quickly leave. If they say, "My vote's private," or "I don't disclose that information," I usually err on the side of not proceeding. I might say, "Oh, I totally respect that. I'm just sharing this update with people who definitely supported Rudy Salas. So thanks so much for your time and have a great day." Sometimes that might pique their interest enough for them to disclose how they voted. If they say they don't remember how they voted, I might try to suss out how they voted on the rest of their ballot, how they voted in the presidential or Senate races, for example. If they say they voted for my candidate, I'll say, "Oh, thank you so much for your support and for being a voter. According to the county, there was a small problem with your ballot signature, but it's really easy to fix. I have a form that you can sign and date, and that will make sure that your ballot is counted." Most people are happy to sign the form and appreciate my help. I also tell them that we'll hand deliver the form to the county to ensure their vote is counted. I also encourage them to write their phone number at the bottom of the cure form in case the county has any questions and needs to contact them. Occasionally, they're suspicious or they're wondering if this is some sort of scam. If they confirm that they did vote for my candidate, I sometimes offer them the form and tell them how they can return it themselves if they're more comfortable with that. Sometimes I may even offer them a stamped envelope to make it easier. After they sign it, I encourage them to take a photo of the form so they have a copy of it for their records. This seems to reassure them that I am legitimate. I always jot down a few notes on a 3x3 Post-it note if there are any factors that might be helpful to know, just in case there are any questions later on. For example, if they had a stroke or have arthritis and that's why their signature didn't match the one on file, I write that down. If they were in a hurry when they signed their ballot, I'll make a note of that as well. Just in case the campaign's lawyers have to get involved to advocate with the county recorder to count a voter's cure form, I always think more information is better than less. Sometimes the hardest part of ballot curing is actually making contact with the voter. Oftentimes, we don't have a current phone number for them, or they don't answer their phone or text messages. So frequently, I'm showing up unannounced, like an unscheduled house call. I may need a lot of luck to come at a time when they're home. Compared with canvassing, where I can just mark voter not home and move on to my next door, I really, really want to talk with this specific person. So here are some other strategies that have increased my chances that I'll connect with the voter. Tip number one, talk with the one in front of you. So frequently, the voter is not at home, but somebody else might come to the door. They can be my ally. If they're friendly, I say, "My name is Elizabeth Chur, and I'm a volunteer with the Democratic Party. I just had a quick update for Alberto. This is actually pretty important. Do you know when he'll be back?" If it's going to be a while, I might say, "I'm wondering if you'd be willing to call Alberto and let me explain this to him directly." By asking the household member to use their own phone, the voter is much more likely to pick up their family member's call rather than mine. Also, this avoids putting the household member in the awkward position of deciding whether to disclose the voter's phone number to me or not. I've been able to talk with many voters directly this way. If the household member agrees to do this, I can have the same conversation with the voter over the phone that I would with them in person, trying to figure out if they voted for my candidate. If they did, I explain the ballot cure process and ask them the best way to get them a copy of the cure form. Oftentimes, we agree that I will leave a copy with their household member, and I leave a post-it note with the campaign office's phone number or my number so they can call to have it picked up when it's completed. While I have them on the phone, I ask if they'd be willing to tell me their phone number in case we need to get in touch with them again. That way, they can decide whether or not to disclose their phone number. If they're willing, I write it down and I make a note of it for the campaign as well. This can make it a lot easier to follow up with the voter later. Tip number 2, embrace your inner detective. If nobody answers the door, I also knock on the neighbors' doors to find out if they know whether the voter still lives there, when they might be home, etc. If they're friendly, I might leave a note with the campaign's phone number on it and ask them to hand deliver this to the voter. Also, in some neighborhoods, it may be difficult to access the voter's front door because the house might be gated or there might be barking dogs in the yard preventing me from getting to the doorbell. Sometimes, if I see a next door neighbor, I'll ask if they can call the voter for me from their phone if they happen to have their number. This has worked like magic. If the dogs seem fairly friendly, sometimes I can give them a dog treat and they'll let me knock on the door. However, if there aren't any neighbors around and the dogs aren't friendly, but I see lights on in the house, I may stand in front of the gate for 5 or 6 minutes. Sometimes, if the dogs bark long enough, the owner comes out to see what all the ruckus is about. That way, I'm able to talk with someone. Patience really pays off. If nobody answers the door, I also listen and look for signs of life. Do I hear someone doing yard work on the side of the house? Is someone working on their car in the garage? Do I hear laughter coming from the backyard? Sometimes I need to follow my ears. Occasionally, there might be gatekeepers between me and a voter. I once cured a ballot in a nursing home. The front desk person gave me the third degree and interrogated me about the reason for my visit. She said, "Are you authorized to talk with this voter?" I said, "Yes, I am." She said, "Well, who authorized you?" I said, "The Rudy Salas campaign." She begrudgingly pointed me toward the nursing station down the hall and said, "Well, if they approve, they'll tell you where to find Mrs. Sanchez." When I got to the nursing station, the nurse pointed at the woman in the wheelchair across the hall and said, "Oh, that's her." I was able to get her to sign the cure form. By the way, I've been told by a geriatric social worker friend that unless a nursing home resident is conserved for mental incapacity, they are the ones who decide whether to let me in, not the staff. This is their home, not a prison. If I'm having trouble finding a particular address or apartment unit, I sometimes ask for help from the mailman, from the UPS delivery person, or the apartment manager. Also, in large housing projects, often there's a map near the office which can help me find the specific apartment number. Similarly, if I only have the street address but not the voter's specific apartment number, the office manager might be able to tell me which unit they live in. Tip number 3, prioritize effectiveness over efficiency. When curing ballots, sometimes I have to go out of my way or do things that are inconvenient. For example, one voter's address was listed in a commercial district. I went into a printing shop and talked with the owner. It turns out that the voter was his granddaughter, who had listed this business address as her mailing address, but she was at home. I asked the grandfather to call her for me from his phone, and she told me she was available all that afternoon, but I worried that she'd get busy doing something else. So I asked if I could come by in 15 minutes, and I went straight there, even though there were other voters closer by that I also needed to connect with. I figured it was better to strike while the iron was hot rather than hoping she'd still be around in a few hours. Since many people don't answer their phone these days, sometimes now is the best time to take care of business rather than hoping that I'll track them down again later. Tip number 4, take your time. Ballot curing is like a boutique form of canvassing. I may only have 10 or 12 voters on my roster for the whole day. It pays to slow down and take all the time I need to get the job done. This is especially important when curing ballots for elders. This is something I've learned from interviewing geriatricians for my day job as a medical writer. Older adults may need more time to think or respond to you. They may have hearing loss, vision impairment, arthritis, or shortness of breath. They may also feel some shame that they're moving more slowly than they used to, or that they're having to correct a mistake on their ballot. Sit down at a table with them if you can. Their fine motor coordination and arm strength may have diminished with age, so it may be hard for them to stand and sign a clipboard. And remember, you want their signature on the cure form to be legible. It's the whole reason you are there. It's especially important to slow down with elders who may be immigrants or who don't speak English as their first language. It's possible that they may have limited literacy or they're not used to filling out bureaucratic forms. I once sat with a Spanish-speaking elder for about 20 minutes as he struggled to fill out the form. I reassured him that I had all the time in the world and lots of extra forms. If he made a mistake, we could just rip it up and start over again. I didn't look at my phone or tap my foot. I sat with him at his kitchen and just tried to breathe deeply. He filled out the form successfully on the third or fourth try, and he breathed a sigh of relief. I shook his hand, and he thanked me for being so patient. And finally, tip number 5, wait for your moment. This idea of patience comes in handy in other ways. I talked with one voter's parents who told me they were all Democrats and expected their daughter back from work in about 20 or 30 minutes. Instead of rushing off to try to cure another ballot, I sat in my car across the street and ate a snack. Sure enough, about 20 minutes later, a car pulled into their driveway. I was able to connect with the voter and get the cure form signed even before she went in the house. Success! Sometimes timing is everything. One time I knocked on the door of a voter, but there was no answer. I knew someone was home. The lights were on, there was a lot of banging in the kitchen, and the stereo was blasting. I knocked as hard as I could, 2 times, but there was still no response. Then the song on the stereo changed, and I realized I'd missed my 3-second window of audibility. I waited another 4 or 5 minutes for the song to change again. I positioned myself next to the window, and when the song ended, I rapped "shave and a haircut" on the window really loudly. I wanted him to hear me, but also wanted to communicate that I was friendly and I wasn't the police or ICE. The voter lifted the curtain and looked out at me, shirtless. He looked surprised and a little embarrassed. He motioned for me to wait, and a minute later he came to the door fully dressed. He said, "Sorry, I was cleaning the fridge and I didn't hear anything." He signed the form and thanked me. That experience taught me the importance of choosing my moment and being ready to knock when it arrived. So let me recap my top tips for ballot curing. Number 1, talk with the one in front of you. Remember, you can ask a household member to use their phone to call the voter so you can make real-time contact with them. This increases the chances that they'll pick up the call. Number 2, embrace your inner detective. You can talk with the neighbors to get more information about when the voter might be home, or they may even help you make contact. The mailman, delivery truck driver, or building manager can also provide useful information or directions. Tip number 3, prioritize effectiveness over efficiency. Sometimes you need to go out of your way to connect with a voter. Try to take advantage of their window of availability, even if you need to drive across town to do it. Tip number 4, take your time. This is especially important when engaging with elders who may move more slowly or have some disabilities. If you project a relaxed, unhurried vibe, they're more likely to trust you and to complete the cure form. And finally, tip number 5, wait for your moment. Sometimes timing is everything. Don't be afraid to wait around if a voter is expected back soon, or to time your knock on the door or the window for that moment in between songs. Getting another cure form is well worth the wait. I hope these tips help you connect with a few more voters as you go on your ballot curing treasure hunt. You can read more suggestions and stories about ballot curing in chapters 7, 8, and 9 of my book, The Joy of Talking Politics with Strangers. It's available in paperback and ebook formats on Amazon and many other platforms. You can find links at my website, elizabethchur.com, which I've included in the YouTube video notes below. Thank you so much for your work to protect and nurture our democracy. The ballots you cure may make all the difference in this election. So thank you for your persistence and dedication. Now let's go cure some ballots.